This is a standard conferment of immunities which government does for all international conferences and summits held in South Africa, irrespective of the level of participation. The immunities are for the conference and not for specific individuals. They are meant to protect the conference and its attendees from the jurisdiction of the host country for the duration of the conference. These immunities do not override any warrant that may have been issued by any international tribunal against any attendee of the conference.
Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Lwazi Somya, who's a senior researcher at the Southern African Liaison Office. Lwazi, good afternoon, good morning, rather, and thank you so much for making time for us. Just a quick clarity around what exactly it is that the department has gazetted over here. And we're also hearing there from the head of public diplomacy saying that there's nothing untoward about this application that has been brought, or the gazette that has been gazetted.
Yes, there's nothing untoward it. It's part of broader diplomatic processes that have been established by the international arena to ensure that there's diplomatic security upon the delegations of various heads of state. So this is not just applicable to the heads of state themselves. This comes with their delegations, which includes the ministers, members of the diplomatic corps, negotiators, advisors, and other members that are required to facilitate the diplomatic engagements during the BRICS summit. This is not new. So the issue of diplomatic immunity all stems from this to the start of diplomacy itself, when Genghis Khan initiated a process of diplomatic immunity to ensure that the kings themselves back in the day, their messengers would not be beheaded, because at the time, the only way you could get a message, whether it was favorable or not, is whether or not your messenger came back alive or not. But now, over time, processes have been created within the international community, including the Vienna Convention, which has set out how do we now engage as states, including how do you treat foreign visitors into your country, especially that represent another government or another head of state. So this gazette itself is in line with previous gazettes the government has issued, including in previous summits that we've hosted on the African Union Summit, which we had that controversy on Omar al-Bashir, includes the COP17 summit, and we'll probably issue the same gazette in 2025 when South Africa hosts the G20. What is very important and very critical in the head of public diplomacy statement is that these immunities that are gazetted do not waiver any warrant of arrest issued out by an international criminal court or international court of justice or any other international tribunal that has found and means towards issue out a arrest warrant and for a government official or member or a head of state to account to the international community.
Yeah, and I see the tweet here again by the head of public diplomacy, Clayson Munyela, saying that, so it's a long caption, but right at the end of that caption, he says that these immunities do not override any warrant that may have been issued by any international tribunal against any attendee of the conference. So as it stands, even with this gazette, it means that South Africa still has a duty to carry out that warrant of arrest against Vladimir Putin should he set foot in South Africa.
And that is correct, and precisely the point that Clayson Munyela is trying to make. And this also stems from the Omar al-Bashir court case, which the court reaffirmed that any arrest warrant issued by any international tribunal still stands even on issues around diplomatic immunity. However, the Rome Statute also makes provision that the country can allow a visitation of heads of states should the arrest warrant not stem from the UN Security Council or referral from a UN the ICC member state. And in this instance, there's a lot of debate within the international law community on whether or not this will be sufficient enough to allow South Africa to not arrest President Vladimir Putin. However, there are now, with applications to the courts, those will be made more greater ventilated in terms of the substantive law and whether or not Parliament will have to step in to domesticate Articles 98 of the Roman Statute, in which they have been suggested in previous ANC statements on the steps to be taken in order to avoid the arrest of Vladimir Putin.
So what is it then that the attendees and international attendees of these conferences that will be taking place, and now speaking about the BRICS summit that will be taking place, what is it that this gazette is trying to protect them against? And I also wonder whether it has anything to do with how the court, for instance, dealt with the issue of the former First Lady of Zimbabwe around that criminal case that was brought against her.
So in terms of purposes, all countries issue out these gazettes in order to provide securities and assurances to their visiting guests. Remember, these are the visitings of heads of state. So there's a level of diplomatic protocol that allows immunities to occur in order for us to prevent any form of violence or war as a result. Because historically, as I've explained earlier on, the diplomatic process itself was largely resolved through conflict, and now the international community has created these new protocols, in order to allow for smoother state engagement, and this is quite the norm. But there are also other contentions, including what you've raised on the warrants issued around Grace Mugabe and her arguing that of issues around diplomatic immunity, and which if a crime is committed on a foreign land, that even within diplomatic immunity, states can also withdraw that diplomatic immunity and the provision that they'll need to hold you to account. But since this is a summit, it presents a very more unique situation where it's not only South Africa that's hosting it. It is 5 countries that have come together, but South Africa, being the host of this, has to ensure that there are safe houses for all participants of the summit. Otherwise, South Africa will be creating a situation of instability within this multilateral institution, and this is why it is necessary for us to have this conversation concerning the importance of multilateralism, and how do we now also offer out the values and principles that South Africa is espoused to, especially concerning the protection of human rights internationally, and ensuring that diplomatic processes are not interrupted with the evolving geopolitical situation.